I'm speaking with 4 women who are lesbian feminists, part of the radical women's movement in Los Angeles. Okay, I'd like to talk about the difference between your movement as a progressive part of the lesbian movement up till this point.
Oh. Well, I mean, my experience with the lesbian movement started a number of years ago when there was only one organization for women. And what this organization actually did, and you can read it in a whole book about them, was they wanted to help lesbians become more feminine, more attractive, so that they would look, so they wouldn't look different, so that they could be accepted and integrated into the society. As my personal political consciousness grew, having anything to do with my hair growing or, you know, wearing pants or whatever, I realized that there's no way for me to be integrated into the society the way it's now structured. And I don't think that changing laws or changing the minds of psychiatrists or sociologists is what's going to do it. And I think that's what makes lesbian feminists different.
There's real circulation, it seems, of women's writings from coast to coast. I mean,
one of the things I'd like to see when I started talking a little bit about, you know, collectives working together is what's very important is the setting up of a feminist press in Southern California. It's a feminist press in New York. Mm-hmm. And by a feminist press, I simply don't mean, you know, a clearinghouse for, you know, for materials. The presses, the photography, everything is done by the women. The women have like a skill that they can work with, but they're putting out and have full editorial control over everything that this press publishes. And I think that sort of working collective is something that lesbian feminists will get into.
Yeah. I think this is all part of this very important thing that I see in lesbianism, and that is that it's like the center of women being able to get together. And that for the first time, women are able sort of to draw their strength that they've been giving to other men so freely for centuries. They're able to give this strength to each other, and that's a terribly important thing to me. For example, just being able to write. Many women are discouraged from writing, and yet I find in the lesbian community that sisters are always encouraging me to do that type of thing, and I don't get that in so much of a heterosexual environment.
let me ask you a question which is a little bit aside, but it's something that I'm curious. Would all of this be going on in any way directed, with any of the writing be directed towards educating men? Or is that simply not a concern?
I like to look at it in maybe the way I feel about it is different from the way the other women feel about it, but I'm not really too concerned with educating men. I feel that I'm more concerned with spending my energies on talking to women, on being with women, and on doing projects with women. I kind of think of women as having that the consciousness of the oppressed people. Like if you were thinking about a colonial society where there were people in power and people who were doing, you know, all of the shit work, like perhaps a society where you had the whites over the blacks, or the society, in our society, where you have the men controlling the women. The power is in the hands of the men. And the consciousness of the oppressed people is quite a bit different than the consciousness of the oppressors. I think you have to, we're in a struggle. We're in a, you know, we're in a struggle to liberate ourselves from old forms. We're in a struggle to realize our full potentials as women. We can't waste our energies. I don't feel we can on trying to educate men to see that we're okay people. I'm not interested in that. I think of all the things that we experience, like, you know, reading someone else's definition of me as a woman, reading someone else's definition of me as a lesbian.
And the power of the printed word.
And the power of the printed word, and knowing that everyone else believes that. That has become an accepted theory because someone who has been set up as an authority has decided to teach the masses what we as women, we as lesbians are. We have had nothing to say about that. You know, we've never had anything to say about that. It's incredible the damage.
And but that's how I see us as really being political, because, you know, here Dr. Rubin's book has been on the top of the bestseller list for how many weeks? all these books, the earlier books on female homosexuality, Frank Caprio and Dr. Bieber with his male homosexuality stuff, and it's pretty, you know, I think revolutionary, political, like to sit back and like know in myself that like I really know more. These people don't know what they're talking about. I'm the authority.
Especially when a report comes out that most people don't know about. Unfortunately, it has to do with male homosexuality, but it's so important. The Hooker report that dispels all these myths, that say absolutely not to all of these things that we have been continually told and are continually being reinforced about. Books are written today by liberal PhDs, by liberal psychiatrists, letting us know the same nonsense that we were told 20 years ago that has no validity today, that we can actually look with facts on government reports, this task force that Evelyn Hooker dispels these myths, and if she were only to do one on women, or somebody would. For a lot of us who have been male, I don't know if there is male identified, or for me,
What does that mean?
Well, that's what I was going to explain. That one of the greatest compliments could have been, oh, you design like a man. You know, you do something like a man. You talk like you're wonderful. You think like, oh, I know what it was. You think like a man. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good. You know, because certainly, you know, my identification was not necessarily with women. It was when I heard about the women's movement, it was, oh, those silly women over there, you know, they were just silly. And what are they doing now? And I hope nobody remembers that I'm a woman, you know, because I don't want to be identified with these silly females and this kind of way of thinking. And with the involvement in the women's movement, for me, a woman's pride began to develop, which is something that I think a lot of women don't have, or the majority of women don't have that, and that when we receive it, it's just the most wonderful thing that can develop, all of a sudden realizing how wonderful it is to be a woman, how wonderful it is to have these attributes, to use what we have, and not to buy any of the stereotypes that we've been taught. Mm-hmm. And from that, what happens is when you say, well, you know, all of a sudden being a woman is wonderful, beginning to look at lesbianism, that aspect of my life, and thinking, this is grand too, you know, and because it has all these new implications, like maybe when I was little, I didn't buy the stereotypes of a woman's life, and then maybe that was very smart, you know, that I didn't buy the stereotype of becoming a wife mother, in that realizing that was all I could do, you know. I mean, I don't mean to necessarily put that role down, so, although I do, because I really have to think about the nuclear family. But that attitude of realizing that we can become whatever we want, that we don't have to become, we don't have to play with dolls necessarily if we want to play with erector sets. And so this sort of thing becomes, as we grow older and develop our lesbianism, within the lesbian, a pride can develop, and I think it's happened with most of the women that I know in the lesbian movement. You know, first woman's pride, then lesbian pride, or maybe vice versa, or whatever. But it's sort of an integral thing that happens.
And the whole thing is when you get to the point of that pride, and like, you know, it's really a beautiful thing to be a woman. It's a beautiful thing to be a lesbian, and somebody says to you, "Wow, you know, that's a really good paper you've written. That's, you know, can make it in a man's world. It's written like a man." You know, you're thinking like a man, you're design. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything anymore because but it's not even an insult, because like you're thinking like you,
right,
and somebody else is carrying around in their mind, you know, like set blocks. This is the way a man thinks, this is the way a woman thinks, this is the way a child thinks. And I think that maybe the epitome of consciousness really is to have, you know, in your mind, like all those barriers just, you know, fall down. And each of us, I think, are trying to be like, you know, the best woman that, you know, that she can possibly be, and that's every component part of us. I don't write papers like a man. Marcia doesn't like design like a man. You know, I do things, you know, like Ellen, who's a woman.
The reason that I just love the lesbian feminists and this whole concept of the thing we're trying to do, and a woman brought it up at one of the consciousness raisings, and that's that she said, and I just love it, that there was this part of us that are women, this little thing that was in each of us that simply didn't die, you know, that just said, when my father turned to me and he said, I can remember this comment, I was going out with some guy and he said, "For God's sake, be stupid, Susan." You know, and that was really, he was just terribly worried by the fact that he thought that I was much too bright for being a girl, you know, and that I wouldn't get married that way, you know, and because men didn't want to marry, you know, women that could put them down or or deal with them as equals. And yet, in spite of this, and this is just one situation, there were hundreds of situations that happens to every woman throughout her life.
Yeah,
There's this little core, and particularly in lesbians, that managed to stay alive. And then when other women reached out, and I couldn't have done it by myself. I mean, for me, it came through consciousness raising and realizing that being a woman was wonderful, and I'm really proud of being a woman, but that this stayed alive in me and just began to come out again when I got into, feminism and then into lesbianism.
A lot of people are very afraid of having those choices that we were talking about before, people knowing that there are choices in their lives. And it's a real fear, because if you show women or children of either sex that there are choices to be made, that they don't have to follow along that little rut and do everything in their power to try to get into that little rut. And if you show them that there are choices to be made, it's a very dangerous thing to the situation that exists now. And I think people are very afraid of lesbians for that very reason. People who are afraid to have their children taught by lesbian teachers, people who are afraid to have their children in a, quote, lesbian atmosphere. Why is that so?
I mean, so long as we were a sickness, so long as we could be institutionalized and set apart in that way, we,
Well, why do they throw us in prison?
Yeah, what I
Separate
want to
us.
ask you about is, for instance, you're eventually all going to be working professionally. Some of you already are.
No, not necessarily.
No.
Well,
In your fields. No, it's
No,
in your...
I don't think I will be, and I've been thinking more and more about this. My whole political consciousness and the fact that I'm in the easiest kind of life to be in. I'm a graduate student, not a very political thing to be, not even in a very political field. It's like, it's an esoteric head trip that I'm on. My ideal, the way I'd like to live out of the city. I'd like to live in a place that has a printing press. I'd like to pump gas to keep myself alive, at the corner gas station, and turn out feminist literature, live in a collective of women.
recently I've become very vocal about my lesbianism, and I'm very tired of the schizophrenia that we used to be surrounded with by having to say, when anyone would say anything about who you're with, who you're living with, I would say my roommate, my girlfriend,
And my friend.
or talking about my boyfriend, making up some absurd name for him.
Saying it's some gritted teeth.
Yes. I mean, so it became an absurdity that I didn't want to continue, and so whenever the opportunity has come up where I've had to either live in schizophrenia, that kind of a situation, or say a woman's name or anything, in relation to my lesbianism, I do it. And I don't know if that's going to hold me back from jobs now.
I think we've all just made a decision. We've all weighed the personal liabilities and decided that, yes, we all have personal liabilities, that doing a show like this could really very well alienate a lot of people. Some of us may not get jobs that we, or we may get, turned down for jobs or put away from jobs, denied jobs that we already have. That big thing with the family. However, I do disagree with you personally. I'm not so afraid for my parents, for their feelings. I think that that's the kind of a thing that we say, I'm afraid, I don't want to hurt them. But in actuality, I'm saying I don't want to hurt myself by them saying to me, what you are is completely alien to anything I can relate to. I wish you were dead type of thing, better dead than what you are, that kind of thing. I think that it's a very real choice that we've all made, that in spite of the fact that we have personal liabilities, that we know that we have to speak out and no longer allow other people's feelings or other people's opinions of us to keep us quiet. We are a very valid group of women that are struggling together in a very valid struggle. We're very proud of what we are, and we do find some strength together, quite a bit of strength together. And so we've made that decision, and to hell with the personal liabilities.
And the thing is, because what we are isn't going to change. I mean, I'm saying it's going to grow, but this is, the sum total of me, not of my mother or of my straight friends, and like it's very important. I think, you know, if it's done well, if it's done, you know, with compassion, with people that, you know, that we can work with, I think just the four of us being here as four lesbians is a very strong, you know, and an important statement. I'm not saying I'm a lesbian, I wish I was something else, or, you know, gee, I hope so-and-so doesn't see me here as a lesbian. Gee, I hope so-and-so does, and I'm really glad about who I am.
What's going to happen in this area in terms of raising children? A lot of, I think one of the most frightening areas for the straight community is the notion of lesbians raising children.
Sure. I think at this point in time, it's an impossibility to raise your children in the kind of atmosphere with the kind of people who possess the kind of qualities that I would like my children to be around. I don't think,
Or any children.
Or any children to be around. I don't like to say my children, as they, you know, it seems to connote that they are possessions, and I don't like that at all. But I think it's an impossibility to do that in a situation with a man.
It gets back to why we left
Yes.
Gay Liberation Front. Right now, until they can see our problem, until they can relate to what we're trying, our struggle, you know, I mean, they just sort of couldn't. Until the time when they can, it's better that we're not there with them. It's better that we're with us, talking with each other, making sure we know exactly what we need, giving us each other support.
And that's what puts us again in the context of, like, you know, this larger revolutionary movement. As we see it now, our needs are to be together with women and get the strength of women together, so our energies aren't going off in a lot of different directions, because so there's like just thousands, millions of women who have, you know, have yet to come to, you know, like good and positive ideas about themselves, that I don't think we can, you know, be going off in a lot of different directions.
And don't forget, if tomorrow or next week the economic structure of the society was overturned and we had something that was akin to socialism, women's position in the society wouldn't be any different. You see, it's not just an economic thing. It's not just, it's a power thing. There are people who are benefiting from the way things are now. Those people are not women. And I am positive that if things were changed now and we went into a form of socialism, we would still be on the bottom. I would like to raise children, all children. I would like to be around them, live with them in a collective community with people who have lost or never had that concept of power over women, people that are not just exactly the same that, you know, as we are, children, dogs, or anyone else. I would like to see, and maybe someone says, you know, this is a utopian ideal. I don't think it is. I think it comes from the politics of experience. I know the way things are now. I know the power. I want to see that taken away. I think it's a very plausible thing. Children and women would do nothing but benefit from that.
Wouldn't you feel that women, if given power, would wind up in the same bags of corruption or of competition or in the same human qualities that...
That's a really difficult question to kind of answer, and I just keep thinking that something is happening in the community of women, some kind of, you know, organic growth. I like to call it personal politics, which is keeping away, like, from all, like, the ists and the isms, you know, Marxist, Maoist, what have you, all those. Our politics are evolving very much out of our experience. We're in a certain place because the world situation, society situation is a certain way, and if we learn from our experience, if we learn from ourselves and our sisters, I don't see how we can turn around and have a world with the same sort of, you know, hierarchical structure, the same, some people on top, some people on bottom. That's why it has to be, you know, a revolution of consciousness, an organic growth kind of thing.
You were saying something I don't know if I can get it all out the way it seemed to have happened when you were filming the gay-straight dialogue.
Right.
And the crew was all women.
Right.
And your ability to do all of the jobs and not feel at all the need to what was it? How did you really put it? You know, that need to be on, make sure that you had your position or something. You know, it was very easy for you to write the little scribbles and to put the film and just do everything. It's that same kind of thing we had when we're with each other. And we as women have been allowed to do certain things that men haven't. We've been allowed to cry. As a matter of fact, we've been told that's our thing. You know, and so we do that, or we do a lot of particular things that men have been denied. And some of these things are really, once we touch them and work together with them, are very positive and good for us. The ability to be very emotional with each other, to cry, to let it all out, to really relate to each other through our own oppression. This is something, I mean, in a way it's sort of sad that the white heterosexual male has nothing to look at to understand the oppression of any of the third world people around him. You know, there's nothing that he doesn't know anything really that firsthand unless he gets into his own situation of being held back emotionally from all of these things. And his position of power, being a master up there where he can't relate to all the people down there having fun, maybe dancing around or whatever, you know, that same sort of situation.
Yeah, I think I'd like to comment on the last question you asked, that if women were given the power, wouldn't things turn out to be the same way, only reversed with women on top and everyone else on the bottom? First of all, what we're asking for is power over our own lives, which is something we've never had. What Ellen was saying before about getting rid of the old structures is very true. We're not looking for hierarchy. We're not looking for power over anyone else, including children. We're looking for new forms. And the second thing I would like to say is that it's not, in my opinion, a human situation, this power structure. That we learn this. It's not that inherent part of human nature to be, you know, power hungry, to be, or to delegate your own power to someone else. This is something that's very learned, and of course women have learned it better than anyone else. I mean, we've just kind of known from the time we were very tiny that you give the power over your fate to someone else, and that's usually a man.
It seems to me that a lot of the problems are not lesbian problems, are not problems of confined to a movement.
See, but now again it brings back that point that recurs to me over and over again of today, right now, today, with the woman's consciousness where it is becoming, you know, where it's going. It seems imperative for the women to almost just get away from the men right now, that there's no way to work right there with them for a lot of women right now. I mean, I hate to just sort of, those women that are struggling to have an equalized relationship with the men that they're with, I'm sure that's very valid and very, you know, and they're working very hard and achieving through this struggle, you know, a great deal of merit in changing their men's minds. But for the most part, women without that kind of deep commitment to a relationship don't have to go through that shit right now. You know, and therefore this alternative, although I really hate to think of it as an alternative, this choice is open to them, this choice that was denied all of us so very recently. You know, just lately we've gotten, I mean, I can have lesbian pride. I used to have lesbian, you know, before some sort of, you know, lesbian disgust because the word was never said. The word lesbian now sounds so fantastic to me. I love to hear it. But before, it was one of the worst words I could ever hear. So today, with this choice that women have, I think they're you know, really more capable of making it within the realm of the need today to get away from men oppressing them.
Okay, what we're going to do here today is what we call a gay-straight dialogue. And there are women in this room who identify themselves as being lesbians, and there are other women who don't identify themselves that way. And I'm sure each one of us, however we identify ourselves, has had the issue of being a lesbian, being physically attracted to other women, and their whole relationship with other women being a big question in their lives at some point, in the past or now. And we want to just talk to each other about some of the stereotypes that we have of what these categories mean to us, what it means to us to see other people who identify themselves as lesbians or identify themselves as straight, or all the other kind of labels that you can put on yourself. And talk to each other about what it really feels like to be what you are and what that means in terms of society. And hopefully we can be really honest about that, because I think among women there's a feeling of trust that can overcome a lot of uptightnesses and get past these kind of categories down to the real feelings that we have about this most personal area of our lives. Have you ever had any lesbian experiences or feelings? How did these feelings affect you? How did you deal with them? And what happened to those feelings? And this isn't just in terms of the past, but in terms of the present. How are you dealing with those feelings now? If you were to think of yourself as a lesbian, how would that affect you? How would that change your conception of yourself? Would it change your conception of yourself? How do you react when you hear the word lesbian, when you find out that someone you know is a lesbian? How do you react to affection from women? How do you feel when you give affection to another woman? How do you feel when you get affection from another woman?
When I was 18, I said, my God, maybe it's not a stage. Because I felt like my relations with men were horrible. And I felt like I was just a big failure with men. And then I went to USC and I lived in a dorm with women. And I found out just by talking with all these women who called themselves successful heterosexual women that my relations weren't any worse than theirs. You know, they got headaches at 11 o'clock at night too, and they didn't come off every time, and they get uptight sometimes when their boyfriends would do something, you know, that made them feel dumb. And I figured, I'm not a failure, you know, and that I don't have to define myself in terms of how well I, you know, get along with men. And shortly after that, I had my first affair with a woman, and it was really beautiful. You know, it's like a whole different way of relating, because we related as equals. And no one was the boy or the man, and nobody was on top, and you know, whoever wanted to could make breakfast in the morning. And it did change my self-concept a whole lot.
Were you afraid of it, or were you pleased with it, or what?
Oh, I was scared to death. In fact, thinking back, like, I was so scared I'm surprised I even did it. But somehow I managed to. And I guess, like, the hardest thing now is living in a heterosexual world. You know, because every movie, I've never seen myself in a movie. You know.
Because I used to read sex books a lot, and I was really involved with sex, and I read all these passages about lesbianism, and it seemed kind of exciting to me at the time. But then it was like, as soon as I got a boyfriend, it canceled all that out. I thought, oh, I'm normal, I can breathe. And I think it was about that point, I started having a boyfriend after boyfriend after boyfriend. It was always I created such a fantasy around having love affairs and boyfriends, because I started having sex with guys when I was 15, that I started feeling like I had to keep creating this fantasy around the man. And that's why later on when I was in high school, one of my best friends became a lesbian. And it kind of, I was fascinated by it, but at the same time I was afraid of it, because I thought I understood women pretty well, and I didn't understand men, and I could keep the fantasy going as long as I didn't, understand the men. Does that make sense?
I had this feeling for this young woman, and we were walking through a wooded area, and she was from New York and very sophisticated, and said, "We call them homos." And I didn't exactly know what she was talking about, but I knew all of a sudden that what I was feeling toward her, I didn't want her to know that I was a homo. And it was real, from then on, I began to be totally aware that no one, I can't explain how it was. I guess all of us, we should have talked to some like lesbians or homosexuals, a secret that no one could ever know, never. When I was in college, my freshman year, I was sitting across from this friend of mine, and we were eating hamburger, and we were talking about our wishes and how when we blew out the candles on our birthday cakes, how we always had the same wish. And I said, yes, I always wish the same thing. And he said, yes, so do I, but I'll never tell him, and neither will I. And we, each of us were wishing that we could fulfill our desire for a relationship with someone of our own sex. But even between us, we were afraid to reveal ourselves. And when I finally did reveal myself, and as I was a sophomore, actually I didn't reveal, when I was a freshman, the boy that I was dating an awful lot, and I dated an awful lot so that no one would ever know, because it was such an unbelievable taboo. And I could not stay under pressure. The social persecution was just beyond me. He said, I can't accuse you. was his way of having me tell him that I was a lesbian. I was like, I can't accuse you. And so this is my introduction to revealing myself as this disgusting kind of a thing. You couldn't accuse me of being this sort of obnoxious, you know. So anytime after that, I had a great deal of trouble finally revealing myself to anyone that this was what, you know, my secret. But within the past 4 or 5 years, the situation has changed with my identification as a woman and getting some sort of a woman pride, and then I'm getting a lesbian pride, which is extremely important. And I don't know if all the damage that people have gotten that are maybe almost 30, you know, or in their 30s or something like that, can be worn away. It seems like the younger women today and men are not getting that kind of a terrible burden. I mean, we sort of have lessened it a little bit, and we can talk about it. I mean, I couldn't talk to anyone.
My mother and my sister warned me. They said, you know, there'd probably be lesbians in the dorm, and they'll attack you. And I thought, oh, they're gonna attack me. And then I got accused of being a lesbian because I ran around nude in the dorms, and everybody thought I was trying to turn them on, and then that really got me uptight. And then, that's terrible. And then I had my first close relationship my sophomore year in the dorm, and it was with this girl, and I hugged her, and I kissed her, and I felt this warm, really excited feeling, and I thought, oh shit, you know, I'm a lesbian. Oh no, here it is. Hold on. And then it was okay, because then I got my boyfriend, and I got engaged, and I was doing the proper thing in society, and I forgot about it. And then I started thinking about Marcia, and then my feelings, I couldn't believe my feelings. Like, I drove by your house once and I got really, really excited. And it was just like the same excited feeling I get before I masturbate or before I have sex with Jack. It was the same feeling. And it blew me out. I thought, God, I'm really, really getting excited just about contemplating, thinking about having a relationship with you. And it just really blew me out.